Welcome to Wayward Writers. We're glad to have you with us today. We have a guest author, Nikki Lenz, and we're so grateful that she was able to come join us. I'm here with Stephanie Bierce and Nikki Jacobsmeyer, my co-hosts, and we are excited to talk about character development today. Stephanie, would you introduce Nikki for us?
I would be happy to introduce Nikki. Nikki Lenz lives in Kansas City, Missouri with her husband and children. She studied elementary education at Southwest Baptist University and taught kindergarten for 6 years, then stayed home with her own tiny humans and now teaches fourth grade. She enjoys reading, travel, glamping, polka dots, red lipstick, and oldies music. She is the author of two books for middle grade readers, Bernice Buttman, Model Citizen, and The Stepmom Shakeup. And we're really excited to have you here. I adore your writing and adore your books. And one of the things that is so great about it is you have incredibly strong characters. And so we were just interested because we understand you've done some different things to build strong characters. And so we wanted to talk to you about that. But first, can you start us in on how did you come to be a writer? Have you always written? Give us a little bit about your own writing path.
Oh, great. I love to tell this story. I started writing really when I was staying at home with my kids when they were little. When you're a stay at home mom and your life consists of a lot of dishes and diapers and stuff, when the kids would take their naps in the afternoon, that was when I would get to write. I don't know. I guess it was like my way to chase a dream while still being at home. I've always loved reading and writing. And I wanted to be an author when I grew up. I didn't know that was really a thing that you could be. I understood that books were written by people, but I didn't know anybody that had actually happened to. Yeah, it was just to entertain myself, and it still is, which I think makes the best books when you write them mostly to entertain yourself.
And it shows in your books because your books are entertaining. They are. They are. You used to write during nap time, but you're back to teaching fourth grade. So you're in the classroom full time. So what does your writing life look like now?
It's mostly during the summer, honestly. I have a good writing buddy that I will send her a chapter a month to edit. I can wrap my brain around editing during the school year, but to draft takes a lot more, I guess, mental energy for me. So I've mostly been doing that in the summer. And honestly, I've only written one other book since I've been back. This is my fourth school year back. It's a lot slower because when I was staying at home, I was writing like 3 books a year, but it's okay. I love teaching. So it's fun to be around kids and they are inspiring.
I was gonna say you're getting some great material every day. I'm sure you probably have, like, your little idea notebook or Post-its or whatever that because
Yes,
fact is stranger than fiction, so
exactly. Yes, and they're always plugging their books to me, like, "I think you should write this," and they give me their little elevator pitches, and I'm like, "Okay, I'll think about it."
I bet you feel like an agent or an editor, right? You're like, "Now I understand," right?
Yes. Today we were writing personal narratives, and this kid handed me his story, and I read the first page, and then I went to the second page, and he had just repeated everything from the first page again on the second page. And I was like, maybe we could do without this page. What if I just took this off? And his little face just went, I was like, welcome to being a writer.
And it feels like that, right? Some days, even
Right?
as adult, when you get feedback, especially if it's face to face, it's keep it together, keep it together,
It's hard. Or don't.
or don't. That works
Yeah.
too. Nikki, okay, when I read Bernice Buttman, of course, I had to have
Oh,
Cheeto
yes.
Puffs every time I read it because I felt like that was only fair to her. And,
Sure.
but I know for your second book, you changed kind of your character creation. Isn't that right?
Uh-huh.
And can you
Yes,
tell us
yeah.
about that?
Yes, you guys know that every project you work on is a little different. And when people ask me, like, my method, I'm like, I wish I had a method. It's just crazy how things come to me, and different parts will come to me in different orders every single time. So I don't even know if I have a method, but when you're chasing the dream of being a published author, you spend years working on manuscripts. Bernice Bettman, I I probably edited that thing for years before even an agent saw it. And then the weird thing happens that the publisher likes your book and they say, "Okay, send us the next one." And that one that I haven't worked on for years, it's still in a much rougher condition. And so that's what happened to me. The edits for Bernice were pretty straightforward. Then they took on Stepmom Shakeup, and the edits, I always call this the book that tried to kill me, because edits for this book were off the charts. Like, they would send me a giant letter, and I would do all the things and send it back, and then they'd just send me another giant letter, and then they'd send me another giant letter, and then I'd get a letter that said, "Can you just start from this new outline?"
Oh,
Oh, but yeah. One of the things they wanted me to work on in the Stepmom Shakeup is they said that the characters were flat, which as an author is not what you want to hear. That your characters are
ouch.
flat because we know they're like real people to us, right? Yes.
Absolutely.
When I got that note about um, flat characters, I just happened to be reading The Road Back to You, which is an Enneagram book with a book study group that I'd been in for years. And we were just reading it for our personal relationships and stuff, but I was struck with the idea that, oh, this is all about personalities. This could help me with my characters. And so I really dug in to that from an author perspective.
Can you tell us a little bit about what the Enneagram is?
Yes.
Just an overview, for our listeners too, or may not be familiar with it.
Sure. You've probably heard of like Myers-Briggs and stuff like that. You take a quiz and it will tell you which of the 9 personality types that you are. I like it better than Myers-Briggs because I feel like it's a little bit less complicated. I can remember in my head what the 9 characters are and what they're about, which I think I could do that for Myers-Briggs. I haven't studied with each of these Enneagram types, though, and this is why it helps with writing. You can find good character traits that these type of people will have. You can find fatal flaws that they will have. You can find what they act like under stress. You can easily come up with theme for what kind of a lesson this type of character would need to learn. So it's really helpful as a writer. If you get stuck, you don't know how your character should be reacting. You can look to this and it will help you.
So
That's
can you use that in the opposite way? Let's say I already know I have a theme, or I already know a certain character and I already know some of the traits of the character. Can I then reverse engineer that?
Yes, that's how I used it. You can use it either way, but I already had these characters that were apparently flat, but I knew what their character traits were. And so as I started thinking about them listing their quirks, I could easily see, oh, the dad was a 1 and the little girl was a 4. And that helped me really figure out more about them.
Yeah. So each one of them, they have a number, but like number 1 is the social reformer, right?
Number 1, do you want me to go through all of them?
Yeah. Tell just the 9, just the overview.
All right. Your number 1s are going to be your perfectionist. Their good character traits are that they have high standards for themselves and for others. They're usually really like social warriors. Their bad personality traits is that they can be really judgy and sometimes even harsh critics of other people. I always say if you think that there's only one correct way to load a dishwasher, you're probably a 1 on the Enneagram. Nobody else cares about
That's an excellent way to think of it. I like that.
that. The 2s are the givers. Those are people that will go out of their way to help others. They will put other people's needs before themselves. And of course, that can also go in a bad direction if they're giving up their own happiness to help others. If it goes really badly, they could end up being stalkers. They're giving too much attention to other people. Um, Also, really good gift givers because they're always thinking of what other people would want and need. So that's the helper. Threes are the achievers. So these are people that seek success and they want other people to believe that they achieved success. So they can often a little superficial, sometimes a little fake. I tell the story of my friend that is a three who will post her workout selfies when we're on a trip where, like, literally we're eating all the worst food that you can eat. And she's posting her workout selfie. So I tease her. She would be fine hearing this, but
No names, Nikki, no
no
names.
names, no names. So the fours are the feelers, and that's what I am personally. Good characteristics about that is that we're sensitive and creative and expressive, but we can also be depressed and can have way too high of expectations for things, especially big emotional things. I give the example of Clark Griswold with his Christmas lights, right? Like if you watch that movie, he is such a four. He's all in his feelings the whole movie. That I feel like that happens to me every holiday. Like my expectations are up here, and then this is where it's up. Fives are those my notes say self-absorbed hermits, but that's not probably nice. Yeah. They are the investigators. So these are the
That's a good word.
bookworms. Yeah.
The science nerds.
Yes, they like information. They like being right. They're observers and thinkers. They're generally not people. They'd rather be in
Hermits?
their library with their books, right? And one of the examples that I gave is this group did a book study about the Enneagram and they all got shirts with their numbers on it really big and they wanted to do a group picture. And if you look at the picture, five's not there. Five just stayed home.
That is awesome.
That's very five of you. Yes. Uh, Sixes are the loyalists, and they are like the best sidekicks. They are cooperative, engaging, likable. They can be a little indecisive, though, and waffle on their decisions. They're terrified that they might lose the support and guidance of other people. Sevens, oh, sevens are fun people. They are the life of the party. They are called the enthusiasts and they always have lots of interests. They change interests really quickly. They are adrenaline junkies, adventurers. Of course, the flip side of that is that they can struggle with commitment and they can cower from reality. And they can also be a bit narcissistic. One story I always tell about sevens is my friend is married to a seven and he will come home and be like, "Yeah, I invited everyone from the neighborhood over for a bonfire today." And she's just always inviting people over, just always wants to have fun and do stuff with other people like all the time. And then the eights are the challengers. They are motivated by having power. So they like to be the boss, the leader, the problem solvers. The flip side of that is that these are this is who I was talking about, your friend. They can be bad at empathizing and they can really not mince words. They're not necessarily sensitive and they can bulldoze people. This is my husband. And he knows it.
He's a self-aware eight.
Yes. I just
Well, that's
tell
gotta
him
count for
being an
something,
eight
right?
hole right now.
You're kinda funny.
Yes. Yeah, you can bleep that out later if you need to.
We'll be sure to put that dad joke in the
Okay, so
comments
then
to use later for sure.
Yes.
yes. And then the nines are the peacemakers, and they don't like conflict, don't like making decisions. They would rather someone just tell them what to do. They also get accused of being lazy because they really prioritize like alone time, rest. I have a friend that's a 9 and she's, yeah, I love when my kids play sports because I just stay out in the car and take a little nap while they're in there. So those are all the 9 characters. Of course, I just barely scratched the surface of what those character qualities are like, but this is all over the internet. And there's tons of books written about it. So you can easily dig deeper into these character types and find out more.
So is there like any mixing of these numbers or are you solidly one thing?
Really, people also take on characteristics of a number next to them. So, for example, I'm a 4 with, I have a 5 wing, is what they call it.
Oh,
So, remember those bookworm hermits?
And
The
here's
other direction I tend to go.
here's
Yes.
the
Yeah.
diagram. And I'm sure we'll put
Yes.
something maybe more
oh.
sophisticated or not. But if for the visual learners out there like me, and you'll find on the internet too, but just so you know, when she says someone by a number by you,
Yeah.
Next door, yeah.
Just to give
next
it some.
door.
Mhm.
Yes.
Exactly, and they call those wings. So if you take a test and it says that you're a 4 with a 5 wing, that means you're mostly have characteristics of a 4, but you tend to also take on some of these other characteristics.
And then as far as if I'm writing my story and I want two characters to be polar opposites, is
Mhm.
that the other side of the
Yeah,
diagram?
I wouldn't say that they're necessarily opposites across the diagram, but if you make sure that your characters are strongly one or the other number, I think that will help you really differentiate. That's one thing that I found is helpful is whenever I'm thinking like Bernice Butman was an 8. She likes to be right. She doesn't sugarcoat things. So you can just, whenever you're writing dialogue or whenever you're trying to decide what this particular character would do, it's nice to be able to go back to that and be like, here's the core of what their personality is like. And hopefully it will be different from the core of another number.
It's nice because there are 9 separate characteristics, and we don't usually deal with 9 main 9 more
Right.
than that. So you can pick the different characteristics to work for the majority of your characters. And yeah, I really I've played with it in trying to engineer some of my not reverse engineering, but it's easier to go forward, say, "Oh, I need this character to do such and such," and look on the character trait list to see what they would be like. I think the thing that helps me the most is looking at the flaw that goes
Mhm.
along with, because you don't always know what that flaw would be if it's not your personality type.
Exactly. I like how they're two sides to the same coin. It's not just picking a random flaw and random good characteristics. They are the opposite of each other. I am this way because of this thing, which is also helpful. You can find all kinds of, I don't know if I've been into this, be real honest, but on the internet, there is a lot about what would have happened in someone's childhood to make them turn out that way. In my husband's
Oh,
case,
yeah.
it's actually really true, but in my case, it's not true at all, so I don't know how much stock I put into it, but if you're writing a fictional character, that's great to be able to look up, "Oh, this is the home situation that would cause this type of character."
That's one of those, it's hard because it's nature versus nurture anyway.
Yes.
But yeah, but it's again, it's just a source, a place to
Yeah.
be able to pull information from when you're stuck. And I think that's the hard thing for me always to come up with is what those flaws are going to be for that personality. And this one has study behind it. It's been used for decades.
Mhm.
And so there's a lot of study and research behind it as to what the opposite, the good part of this, and then the bad part of this characteristic trait. So if you're
Exactly.
the, yeah, if you're a number one and you're perfectionist, then sometimes that comes back to bite you.
It helps to lead to your theme as well. Or if you have a theme, it helps to figure out what type of characters would best tell a story to that. So for me, theme is really important. The first 7 books I wrote, I didn't bother to put a theme in there, and that's really bad, guys. Your book should have a theme. So, once I kept getting the feedback of, "Your characters never grow, they never change, they just stay the same." And I realized that's because I did not engineer that, like, I didn't put that in there. So, you have to think through that. What do you want your character to learn? Because that's what kids are gonna learn when they read it. And what type of character most needs to learn that lesson. And I actually did do that when I wrote Bernice. I knew I wanted to write a story about a bully. And so I tried to think back through my life of kids I've known that were bullies. I'm a teacher, so I've known a few in my day. And yeah, just thinking I wanted, I knew I wanted the theme to be like, you have to be a friend to have a friend. And so who would need to learn that lesson? Someone who doesn't have friends. That's a bully, right?
Yeah.
So that really was the launching point for that book. I would like to say it's always comes together that nicely, but it doesn't.
That's why it's so good to have some other tools in your author bucket
Yeah.
to be able to pull out and use too. Yeah.
So, other than the primary character traits and the flaws, can you go a little more into what else does this method show you?
So for me, when I was working on Stepmom Shakeup, I had a few character traits for each of my characters that were flat. And so this helped me look at what is the rest of numbers character traits and how can I work more of this in? Because if I'm maybe I knew in my mind that they would have these other traits going on, but I wasn't showing them in my writings. For example, the main character, Grace, in the Stepmom Shakeup is a 4. And so a very 4 trait is to wear weird clothes. I am wearing a dress with brains on it right now. I wanted to make sure that I mention what she's wearing because sometimes I'm bad about remembering to describe things. That's probably my weakest third trait. But that way I remembered in each scene, okay, tell what she's wearing because you know she's wearing something weird. It gives me a bigger pool to look at for each character of little details that you can work in. That's where the character comes from, is in those details.
And doesn't it also talk about like building a healthy relationship with someone else, like what that number would need to do or work on? I know I found that kind of helpful. Okay, so now 1 and 7 or whatever are going to interact and try to have this relationship, whether it's a mom and her daughter, or for adult fiction, a man and a woman, or whatever it is. So you can, it goes a little deeper than just that person. Like they talk about interactions with other numbers too, if I remember correctly.
Yes, absolutely. That is really helpful. You can Google any 2 number combinations and look up like what their relationship strengths would be and what their potential problems would be. For example, I'm a 4, my husband's an 8, so I'm like really sensitive and he's really not sensitive. So when we communicate, he has to pull back his criticism. I have to get a little tougher skin and take things he says with a grain of salt. Yeah, you can find all kinds of things like that of how different numbers would interact with each other. And that is super helpful when you're playing conflict in your stories so that you don't have the same types of conflict happening every single time.
Okay, so say I work on my manuscript and I try to apply this. It's also nice if you can find someone that's in your critique group or something like that that you trust that is familiar with this and almost be like, okay, tell me as the reader what number you think so and so
Oh,
is
yeah.
to see if you've gotten it right. Because as we all know, we're not sitting with our reader, although sometimes we want to be like, oh, what I meant was, did you see that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
I
that
mean,
would be a way to, I was just thinking about this. So, Stephanie,
yeah,
you
that
poor
would be
thing, you're
great.
going to have to read something and tell me.
Definitely, that would be helpful. My critique partner's question she asks me the most is, "What is this character feeling right?" Because I always forget to give them reactions to things.
I found it so fascinating and I've tried to play with it and use it. So I've tried to like go online and give my characters the quiz,
Oh, yeah.
have them
That's
answer
a great
the Enneagram
activity.
quiz to see
Super
if I've
smart.
got them in the right category. If I want someone to be a 4, I'm not a 4. Oh, they have feelings. Oh dear. I'm like,
Yeah. So, our
Yes.
listeners are going to have to go take the quiz and then share with us what number
yes.
you are, right? Because
Yeah.
that's
Absolutely.
fun. Maybe you can
I
find
know.
critique partners
Maybe
or people that you can be like, so you're this. What would you do in this
Yeah.
situation?
Oh, yeah. Once you do any research on this, every person you meet, you'll be like, "Oh, that person's a 2. Oh, that person's a 4." Oh, like, you're definitely
I know.
diagnosing
And then
people. Which you're
And then
not
you make
really
your
supposed to
spouse
do
or
that.
your partner
I know
take it
what they're
too because you must know what they are.
So, I
exactly.
read
Well,
what you need to do to help
yeah,
me out is
Yeah.
this.
the first chapter in the book, The Road Back to You, was about dates, and I would tell you what, I was not, like, on board with this book. I was like, "Why are we even reading this? I don't really care." And then that first chapter was so my husband, like, every single thing they said, I was like, "Oh." And I was a believer.
It seems so strange that we could put everyone in 9 different categories. It just seems like people are so unique and different, and it makes me think about the fact that you could take this method, but at the same time, maybe you'd wanna flesh it out with that nature nurture, but also all experiences that they've had or, like, that backstory that everyone is gonna have. What would the different numbers do in this situation? And,
Mhm.
no, it makes me so curious.
Yeah, and I think, like, when you're dealing with real people, of course you're gonna have outline characteristics. You're not gonna fit in the box perfectly. But if you're making up people, it sure does give you like a jumping off point. You can of course give them
Right.
rich backstory and things like that, but it just gives you a way to see people from different perspective than my own personal experience.
And Nikki, am I making this up?
Yeah, I
Because
think it's
that
it's just a
happens. But I feel like, I don't know if it was this resource or not, if I'm making this up, but doesn't it talk about when, we'll just say the twos, whatever number, when twos act this way, or these are their strengths, these are their weaknesses, challenges, stuff like that. When a two is under pressure or under stress, they act this way. Am I making
No, you are not making that up, and I do not have in front of me my little chart about
yeah.
that, but that is true, like, it
okay?
will tell how each number, um, will behave in their when they're at their best, and how they will behave when they're at their worst, like, when they're under the most pressure, the most stress, so that's helpful to look at too, obviously.
Yeah, because when
Right.
Heather was saying that, that for us all to fit into one of 9 categories, which obviously this
Mhm.
is a place to jump off and stuff, that just triggered. I was like, I feel like there's something because we do obviously in different situations.
And perhaps Myers-Briggs or some of those other tests are more accurate for real people, but when you're writing, I have to be able to hold all these characters in my head at once, and I have to remember what is their kind of course. And for me, having it be a little more simplified in real people is actually helpful.
And there are, I know other authors do. I have a friend who gives every one of her characters the Myers Briggs test. She takes it as them. That's a lot. Have worked as I'm a certified counselor, and it's like giving the Myers Briggs to every one of your characters is commitment,
Yeah.
serious commitment.
I can
that
barely remember what my 4 letters stand for in that. So to have to keep track of a bunch of people's 4 letters, I think would be
yeah,
hard.
it's hard. This is one that's like you said, you can hold it in your head. And so I think it's
Mhm.
an easier one to use to play with for something like this. But there are so many other assessments out there that you can use. You may find something that works better for you. There's the disc, and there's just a long list of personality tests and indicators that you could use and play with for your characters. And I think we'll have some of that in our newsletter if people are interested in checking out some different ways to create their characters and give them depth. And I think that's exactly what I'm looking for when I'm creating a character, is trying to make sure that it has depth, that it's the dread, oh, flat character. And so
Yes,
this
no
is
one
just a
wants a
way
blank.
to, I know. And when you hear that, I understand. 'Cause, oh, I didn't mean for you to be like, I was trying to give you depth. But like the emotional thesaurus, that's another
Oh,
Yes.
yeah,
good source.
that's a
But I could go and look in the emotional thesaurus and see, oh, my 4 should actually feel something. Yes.
and how can I show it instead of tell it? That's what that one
Yes.
helps me for.
My number 5 is never there. He's always all alone and off by himself.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I think it's a great idea to try and take a test, the little quiz as your character. That's just a great way to get your brain thinking about all these different ways they would react to things. So even if you don't end up using the numbers or the labels, at least it gets you to think, how would my character respond if somebody didn't load the dishwasher in the way it's correct?
I think you could even take it one step further. Use this personality test on people that you actually know and see what they are, and then see how you can see more depth into knowing their backstory, knowing how they reacted to certain things. I feel like you could really get to know the different personality numbers by observing people in your real life and then seeing how maybe they're a little different than what the thing says and why are they different. And
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think it's a great idea for authors to be good studies of character, and I think it just would make us better at coming up with characters in the first place if we could study it a bit and apply it.
Always helpful, like if I'm writing a character that I know is a 4, that's easy. I just think, what would I do? But if I'm writing a character that's a 2, I can think, oh, what would my sister-in-law Michelle do in this situation? She is
Mhm.
definitely a 2. That is helpful.
All your family and friends have just had all their laundry aired out on their numbers, and I'm just loving that you have these relationships with them that they are like, they know they're their number, they're good with it. I think that is so awesome, and but I think, right, that's what we're supposed to do with our characters, and I know a lot of people, part of their process is, before they draft or maybe after they outline before they draft, or depending on what their process is for that day, that they like date their character. Let's go have a cup of coffee with my protagonist or my antagonist, whoever it is, and really make them more dimensional.
Real.
And
Yeah.
I think I know sometimes, just speaking from personal, you're like, let's get going. And you forget that the writing isn't just the physical words. It's
Yeah.
this whole process. And in order for us to get our characters done as well as we can, this is a great way to at least to start and to maybe it may not feel so overwhelming.
Mhm. Yeah, it's hard to make people.
It it is.
But I will say Bernice Butman just came to me fully formed. Like, I never had to think about what she would do about anything because she just knew her in my mind. I think that is important for your characters as well. I don't know how to make that happen though. You only get one of those characters in your career that just lands in your lap like that with her bucket of cheese balls.
Let's hope not.
Well,
Absolutely.
listen, I have outlines for Bernice Butman 2 and 3 and 10,000 words of Bernice Butman 2, but nobody's bought that yet. So I would
What are
love.
you working
Okay,
what are you
so
working with now?
once I started teaching 4th grade, realized how obsessed middle grade kids are with video games. And so I have been working on a mashup of, this is going to sound weird, of Pilgrim's Progress and Ready Player One. So it's Christian fiction
Ooh.
that deals with virtual
Cool.
reality. And because I teach at a Christian school, I
Uh-huh.
wrote it for the kids that I know. So that's in its final editing stages. I actually think I might try and read it to my class. I've never read
Cool.
any of my books to my class before. Makes
That's
me too
awesome.
nervous, but I would like their insight into it, especially to see if I got the video game stuff right.
And Nikki, you know what you
Those are
could
gonna be
do?
awesome beta readers for you.
Yes, you could even see if there's another teacher or someone that's off that hour and they read it, and then you can observe their faces and their expressions. Then that way you don't have to send a permission form home to ask for that. Can I please record your children's faces while I read them my story? Like when you're at a point where you're like, my
Listen,
intention is for people to think this is funny or to be shocked. And then you can
yeah,
watch and that actually happens or something.
that's great. Yeah. And I don't know that I'd have to watch their faces as much because they will for sure interrupt me if I don't understand something or if I did something wrong. They will definitely let me know.
Perfect.
Yeah. Kids are much more honest than adult beta readers, let me just tell you.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
it's a
I
good thing.
remember when my youngest, was a little younger and I was reading him something and I was mid sentence and he goes, "Mom, I'm so bored." And I was like, "Go get a snack and grab mom a glass of wine. Thanks so much." He's like, "Be careful what you wish for," right? Like your mom, where they'll be like, "Oh, it was lovely." I am so bored. Got it.
Yes.
Got it.
I think it would be pretty apparent if they were.
This was so interesting, and I really appreciate you talking to us about it because sometimes you need, just like I said, some extra tools. And I think this is a fun one. It's fun to explore. And like you said, figure out the people around you and then use them. We're always doing that anyway, aren't we? I'm always like in the coffee shop listening to the person next to me. And my husband's, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, I found a good character."
Yep, for sure.
Yeah. So this will save me from becoming the stalker. I'm a 2.
You're a 2.
I'm gonna be a stalker.
That's so funny.
May have saved me from jail time. Thank you, Nikki.
I live to serve.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Can't wait to see what next you put out on the shelves with all your
Yes.
great character development. And thank you for your time and being here.
Of course, I had so
Thanks,
much
Nikki.
fun. Thank you, guys.
Bye bye.